Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about verse 31 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham. From verse 28 onwards, Bhagavan is talking about the state of the Jnani from various perspectives. So this verse is a continuation on that theme. What he says in this verse is, I'll read it in Tamil first and then I'll explain it in English. Vandi tulvanaku avandi salla nitralodu vandi tani utridudal maname vandiam un udul ullei urangum meinyani kumana toril nishtei urakam. What that means is, to the knower of reality, who is asleep within the fleshy body, which is like a cart, activity, nishta, and sleep are just like to a person sleeping in a cart, that cart moving, standing, or the cart remaining alone. That's the basic meaning. If we slightly expand it to clarify, that is to explain it more fully, an explanatory paraphrase would be, to the main Jnani, the knower of reality, who is asleep within the fleshy body, which is like a cart, activity of mind or body, nishta means firmness, fixity, steadiness, motionlessness, inactivity or samadhi, and sleep are just like to a person sleeping in a cart, that cart moving, standing, or the cart remaining alone, separated from the bullocks that were yoked to it. In other words, he's talking about the three states of a cart. Either the cart is moving, or it's standing with the bullocks still yoked to the cart, or it's remaining alone, means the bullocks have been unyoked. To the person who is asleep in the cart, they are not at all aware of any of those changes. They're not at all aware of the movement of the cart, it's standing still, or it's standing unyoked. Likewise, for the main Jnani, May is a Tamil word that means the reality, and Jnani means one who what knows, so the knower of reality, in other words, the Atma-vichara. For the Atma-vichara, just like the person in the cart is unaware of the different states of the cart, the Jnani is unaware of the different states of the body and mind. People often, that is, Bhagavan has made it very, very clear that the world appears only in the view of ego. That is, as he says, for example, in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what it is giving up everything. The reason he says that is, everything here means all phenomena, both mental phenomena and the phenomena that seem to be physical but are actually just mental. In other words, all this material universe, which is just a series of mental impressions actually, but it seems to us to be a solid external world. All these things appear only in the view of ego. Not only do they appear only in the view of ego, they have no existence independent of their appearance in the view of ego. So when ego doesn't exist, nothing else exists, no phenomena exists. So in sleep, for example, Bhagavan was very unequivocal, but in sleep there is no mind, body, or world. For many people, this is very difficult to understand. They say, oh, but though when I was asleep, I wasn't aware of the world, but there were other people in the world, I mean, other people who were awake, and they told me the world continued when I was asleep. So how can you say the world ceases to exist when I'm asleep? Bhagavan's reply to such objections were um, calling on the testimony of people in the world to testify to the existence of the world in sleep is like calling on a thief to testify his own innocence. Of course, the thief is going to say, "I was innocent. I wasn't there. I didn't commit the crime." If you trust the testimony of the thief, obviously you're going to be misled. What is in question is whether the world exists or not when we're asleep. If in the waking state we ask other people who are a part of that world, of course they're going to say the world exists, but that when the question about whether the world exists or not in sleep arises because we have every reason to doubt whether the world exists independent of our perception of it. So if we ask other people who are part of the world, of course they're going to say they exist independent of our perception of it. If you ask anyone in a dream whether the world exists when you're not seeing it, they'll say, yes, of course, we are here all the time. Whether you may be sleeping, but we're awake and we see the world. The reply of those people may seem to be very convincing so long as we are dreaming. But when we wake up from a dream, we understand those people who certify the reality of the world in dream are themselves a part of that world, all of which was just a mental fabrication. So Bhagavan, according to Bhagavan, the world does not exist independent of our perception of it. Therefore, when ego is destroyed, there is no, after the destruction of ego, there is no world appearance. There's no one left to experience the semi-existence of the world. Many people objected to this when Bhagavan said that. They said, but Bhagavan, your ego has been destroyed, but you're still seeing the world, you're answering our questions, and you're engaged in the same activities we're engaged in. So how can it be said that the Jnani isn't aware of the world? In answer to such questions, Bhagavan wrote this verse. That is, we think Bhagavan is seeing the world and responding to the world, answering our questions and everything, because we take Bhagavan to be the body. But Bhagavan's fundamental teaching is, I am not this body. So what Bhagavan actually is infinite, well, as it's beautifully described in the Upanishads, that is, Brahman is described in the Upanishads as Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. Satyam means reality, what actually exists. Jnanam means awareness, Anantam means infinite. So Brahman is infinite being awareness, Satchit. And Bhagavan is no different Bhagavan is Brahman itself. Brahman means our own reality. So that is what Bhagavan actually is. Bhagavan is not the body, but he appears to be in our view. Because we are always looking outwards, seeking for happiness in things other than ourselves, it's necessary for Bhagavan, who is our own reality. Bhagavan is what we actually are, the pure being awareness that we actually are. So Bhagavan, in Bhagavan's view, we are no different to him. So Bhagavan loves us as himself, because he doesn't see us as anything other than himself. So out of his infinite love for us as himself, that his infinite love is what functions in the form of grace. And so it is grace that manifests, well, Bhagavan himself, the grace and Bhagavan are not two different things. So he manifests outwardly in the form of a body in order to give us these teachings, telling us to turn within. And he tells us the Guru is not the outward form. Though it is necessary for Guru to appear in an outward form in order to teach us to turn within, Guru is not that outward form. So what is shining through that outward form that we call Bhagavan, that is our own reality. But our own reality is pure being awareness, which is never aware of anything other than itself. So in our view, Bhagavan seems to be a person just like us. He seems to be a body and mind, and so he seems to be he's active in the world. He answers questions. He writes verses and so on. This is all only in our view. In his view, he's just like the sleeper in the cart. Just like the sleeper in the cart is unaware of whether the cart is moving or standing still or unyoked. For Bhagavan, whether the body and mind are active or remaining in nishta or asleep, all these are true only in our view, not in his view. In his view, what exists is only himself, the one infinite Satchit, being awareness. Is that an adequate explanation of that verse? Or does anyone have any questions about that?
Thank you, Michael. So in this, regarding this verse, let me just pull it up real quick. So he's basically unaware, and I think that would be the explanation. I remember in Chadwick was once asking Bhagavan why Jesus was crying on the cross.
Yes, yeah, I remember. Yes, I can't remember exactly what Bhagavan said.
But this would be the explanation, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Can I explain something, please?
Yeah, yes.
When Christ was crying on the cross, why have you forsaken me? It's well known, at least in scholarly circles, that he was beginning the song of praise. I think it's Psalm, I'm not sure what Psalm it was, Psalm 22, I think it was. And it begins as a lament, but ends as a song of praise. And what he was beginning was a song of exaltation.
Okay, I don't know if Chadwick knew that, but anyway, that Chadwick asked that question to Bhagavan, and I think Bhagavan, I can't remember exactly what Bhagavan replied, but very probably Bhagavan would have said, "In whose view was he crying out?"
that's
in our
exactly,
view.
yeah, that's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Thank you, Michael. And then so this verse pretty much follows the same theme as the previous one, right? She basically describes the Jnani.
Yeah. The previous one implies the Jnani is like the person listening to a story, but their mind has gone far away. He's not at all aware of what's though he seems to be listening, he's not listening.
Right.
But there are two verses, very interesting verses in Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, verses 18 and 19. These verses are people often don't understand the significance of these verses, but they're very nice, deep verses. Wait a second, I'm just trying to find it. It's in this context, it's useful to consider these two verses, because we all know Bhagavan's fundamental teachings are that the body is not I and that the world is not real. But in these two verses, Bhagavan seems to be saying the opposite. But that's why we need to pay close attention to what Bhagavan actually says. Oh, sorry, no, actually I should start. It's not 18 and 19, it's 17 and 18. I'll start with 17. Yeah, so he begins 17 by saying, Uڵḷadu, the body is only I. Both for those who do not know themselves and for those who have known themselves. So this seems to be, Bhagavan is saying, not only for us Ajnanis does the body seem to be I, is he saying that the Jnani also experiences the body as I? We need to pay close attention to what he's actually saying, because in the next sentence he says, Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu. That is, for those who do not know themselves, I is only to the extent of a body is I. That is, I is limited to the extent of a body. Alave means only to that extent. So only to the body's extent is I. Whereas Uڵḷadu, within the body, tan unandaku, for those who have known themselves within the body, that means within the lifetime of the body, ellayara, without limit, in other words, infinite, tan olirum nan. That is oneself that shines without limit. Or oneself I shines without limit. And then he says, iduve innava tam bedum en. That know that this is, consider that this is the difference, but the difference between them is only this. So what exactly is Bhagavan saying here? He's saying the body is actually I, both for those who do not know themselves and those who do know themselves. But the difference is, for those who know themselves, I is limited to the extent of the body. So only this body is I. Whereas for those who have known themselves, I shines without limit. That is, since I alone exist, whatever seems to exist cannot be other than I. So, as Sadhu Om often used to say, for the Ajnani, the body, only the body is I, or I am only the body, the body only is I, if the body alone is I, whereas for the Jnani, the body also is I. That is, since there's nothing other than I, what could the body be other than I? But for the Jnani, I is not limited to the body. I shines without limit. When he says it shines without limit, he means it shines without form, because every form is a limitation. So because the Jnani is infinite, he's devoid of form. So he doesn't, the Jnani doesn't, this doesn't mean that the Jnani is experiencing themselves as the body. As Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So for the Jnani, there is no body or world. But what we see as the body of the Jnani, and we take that body to be the Jnani, that is, we take Bhagavan to be the person that he seems to be. In Bhagavan's view, that is also I, because there's nothing other than I exists. That doesn't mean he's aware of the body as such. What we see as the body is what he sees as I. So it's a very subtle point he's making here. And in the next verse, he says it's similar. So just like in the previous verse, he begins by saying, Uḍal Nāne, the body is only I. In this verse, he begins by saying, Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, the world is real, both for those who do not have knowledge, mean self-knowledge, and for those who have such knowledge. And then he goes on to say, Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, for those who do not know, reality is to the extent of the world. When he says it's to the extent of the world, it's limited to the extent of the world. What is real is this world, and nothing else is real. There's no, the material world alone is real. That's our view. Or if not the material world, phenomena alone are what is real. There's no reality beyond that, in our view. But for the Jnani, Uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu Anubandham that is, for those who have known, reality pervades, devoid of form, as the support for the world. The support means the adhara. Adhara means the ground, or the base, just like the snake is the adhara for the seeming rope. Sorry, the rope is the adhara for the seeming snake. So for the Jnani, only the underlying awareness, the underlying reality, the satchit, the being awareness, that alone is real. And that is devoid of form. But what the Jnani sees as satchit is what we see as this world. So for Bhagavan, yes, this world is real. But what Bhagavan sometimes clarified this, saying, the world is real, not as world, but as the underlying reality. That's what he's implying here. The underlying reality is satchit. As satchit, the world is real. This is just like saying, the snake is unreal as a snake, but it's real as a rope. That is what we mistake to be a snake is actually just a rope, and the rope is real. So as the rope, the snake is real, but as a snake, it's unreal. That's what he's implying here. The world as world is unreal. But what we see as the world is actually the reality, the one infinite satchit, which is devoid of form because it's infinite. All forms are finite. The infinite is devoid of form.
Yes, and that's why Muruganar in Guru Ashokava, it takes the first 70 verses or so to strike that balance, that approach of, what is real, what is not real.
Yes.
And that's from the viewpoint.
He talks about the unreality of the world and about the reality of the world.
Exactly, right.
The reality of the world, unreality of the snake is, as a snake, it's unreal. The reality of the snake is, as a rope, it is real. Likewise, this world and this body and world are unreal as body and world. They are real as the one reality, the infinite I.
Thank you, Michael. So last month, there was a question posted on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. And I'm going to just read that question. Everything is starting with a quote of yours. Everything that we experience is nothing but a project of our vasanas. So I'm going to repeat it. Everything that we experience is nothing but a projection of our vasanas. Okay. And then another quote of yours. Whatever we experience is prarabdha, God's will. Okay. So the second quote is, whatever we experience is prarabdha, God's will. So then the question is, taken from previous videos, they are different statements. So they both inflict experience? That's the question.
Right. Okay. Yes. When Bhagavan explained this, he often used the analogy of a cinema projector. So our vasanas are like the images on the film reel. So whatever we see outside, all the vishayas, all the phenomena, are nothing but a projection of our vasanas. However, though everything we experience is a projection of our vasanas, just like everything is seen on a cinema screen is a projection of the images on the film reel. The film was edited by God. So which images appear on the film reel, namely the prarabdha, of each life is selected by him and therefore his will. So these two statements that this person quoted are seen superficially. They seem to be in conflict, because everything we experience is nothing but a projection of our vasanas. Our vasanas are our will. But if we also say whatever we experience is prarabdha, which is God's will, there seems to be a conflict there. But if we understand it in terms of this analogy that Bhagavan gave, it is clear. That is, all phenomena appear. All phenomena are a projection of our vasanas, but the vasanas are like the images on the film reel, and the film reel, in other words, which vasanas will be projected as which images, which will be projected as which experiences, is determined by God. So if we had no vasanas, vasanas are our inclinations. Vishaya vasana, that's the inclinations to experience Vishayas. If we had no Vishaya vasanas, there would be no projection at all. But since we have Vishaya vasanas, God has control over which vasana should be projected as the world. So in other words, whatever is given to us to experience is in the hands of God. Though it's all a projection of our vasanas, it's in the hands of God, because he decides what we should experience. And what we experience is all the fruit of our past karmas. So the fruit of our past karmas that we are now experiencing are a projection of our vasanas, but they're in the hands of God. But at the same time that we're experiencing this prarabdha, what is given to us to experience, we have, because of our vasanas, we have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, and so on. So because we have these vasanas, there are things we want to experience and things we don't want to experience. Because we want to experience certain things, we make effort, we do actions in order to experience those things. And because we want to avoid other things, we do actions to try to avoid them. But what we have to experience in this lifetime, we will experience. That is already, as Bhagavan said, what is never to happen will not happen in spite of any amount of effort. This is in the note that he wrote for his mother. Endrum naduvadadu, envechikanam naduvadu. When he says envechikanam, that means no matter how much effort, that implies that we have the freedom to like to avoid what is happening and to try to avoid what is happening. But however much we want to avoid it and try to avoid it, if it's destined to happen, it's going to happen. We cannot avoid it. Likewise, in the next sentence, he says, Nāṛpadu entaresayanam Uڵḷadu. what is to happen will not stop in spite of any amount of obstacle. So we can want to avoid things and try to avoid things, but we cannot avoid them if they are destined. So what we are not destined to experience, we will not experience, however much we want to experience it and try to experience it. What is to happen, we cannot avoid experiencing it, however much we want to avoid it and try to avoid it. So some of our vasanas are like the images on the that is, certain vasanas Bhagavan has selected as the images to be put on the film. That is what is projected, that is our prarabdha. But we have so many vasanas, so what is projected is often not what we like. So many things happen to us in our life, but we don't like, we prefer to avoid it. For example, we may suffer from some disease, or we may suffer from bereavement. One of our loved ones may pass away. We would certainly prefer to avoid that, and we can make all sorts of efforts to avoid it. But if it's destined to happen, it's going to happen. So both the prarabdha and the efforts we make to avoid it, all are the seeds of both our efforts and the prarabdha, all are our own vasanas. But whereas the prarabdha is those vasanas that Bhagavan allows to project, because they are the fruit of actions that we've done in the past, under the sway of vasanas. So ultimately it's all a play of vasanas. But God has the controlling hand. What we are given to experience, that is, we need to distinguish between what we, some people object to, when we, that is, many people, it hasn't always been recorded very clearly in the books. So in some books it's recorded, the Bhagavan said everything is prarabdha, everything is preordained. When he means everything is preordained, he's talking about what we are given to experience. But he also made it clear that we have freedom of will and action. If we didn't have freedom of will and action, he wouldn't say however much effort is made or however much obstacle is made. The reason he says that because we do have freedom of will and we do have freedom of action. But though we have freedom of will and freedom of action, we do not have freedom to choose what to experience. But people object to this, say, no, but if you make effort for something, you're experiencing the effort, you're experiencing the action. So doesn't that mean the action is also part of prarabdha? Then we need to distinguish between what we are given to experience and what we experience as a result of our own immediate efforts. That is, we can experience wanting to avoid something. We can experience trying to avoid it, or we can experience wanting to achieve something and trying to achieve it. But though we can experience the desire and the effort, we cannot experience any result other than what is preordained. So which vasanas are projected as this world, as the experiences we have in this life, though there are vasanas, which vasanas should be projected at which time as the experiences is determined by God. But when we're experiencing those that projection that is determined by God, other vasanas are determining whether we like it or dislike it, whether we want it or try to avoid it. So that is the play of vasanas is very, very, as Bhagavan says in Nana, in the beginning of the 10th paragraph, he says, though Vishaya vasanas, rising countless Vishaya vasanas, which come from time immemorial, rising countless numbers like ocean waves. So the whole of our waking state and dream state, that is every waking state and every dream state is just a play of our vasanas. But what we are given to experience in these states, those vasanas are what he has selected and as the prarabdha. But we are constantly reacting to the prarabdha with other vasanas. So it's this play of vasanas is something very very complex, and how God is controlling it it's very subtle. And what freedom we have the freedom to want, and we have that is what Bhagavan called the Ichcha Swatantra, the freedom of will, and the Kriya Swatantra, the freedom of doing. But we have no freedom to determine what we are given to experience. That is determined by prarabdha. Have I explained that clearly?
Yes, yes. So, so between the three, freedom to will, or wish, then number two, freedom to act, then number three, freedom to experience. What is locked in is the third, freedom to experience.
We have no freedom to experience.
Right. So that is decided by God.
Yeah.
Right.
That is, as Krishna says in the Gita, you have the right to the action, not to the fruit thereof. And as Bhagavan begins Upadeshundya by saying, Karmam payandaral kartana danayal. Karma giving fruit is by the ordainment of God. So once we have done an action, it's out of our hands. It's God alone determines the fruit of those actions. So an analogy that is often given, if a hunter shoots an arrow, before shooting the arrow, he can aim it and he can decide what he's going to shoot. As soon as he's released the arrow, it's out of his hands. If after releasing the arrow, he finds it's going towards a person, for example, there's nothing he can do about it. He's released it. Likewise, once we've done an action, it's out of our hands. The fruit is always in the hands of God.
Right.
That is why Krishna says you have the right to the action, not to the fruit thereof. Why the context in which Krishna said that is, we need to, when we act, we need to act with. We need to do nishkarmiya karma. That is, whatever actions we do, we should not do. We should do for the love of God, as Bhagavan says in the third verse of Upadeshundya. Kartano karkam, that is, we do it for God, not for whatever result we get from it. So when we act, we do what we think is the appropriate action in each circumstance. But often our actions have consequences that not the consequences that we want. So we have a moral responsibility to do those actions which we judge to be the correct action according to a circumstance. But once we've done the action, it's out of our hands. It's God who determines the fruit. So nishkarmiya karma means we do the action. We try to do, obviously we don't do selfish action. We do actions that we consider to be the morally right action, or at least morally neutral action. But we should do it without desire for a particular fruit. So if we think a certain thing is good, we can make effort for it. We can try to achieve it. But the outcome may be quite different to what we were expecting. We should accept with equanimity whatever be the outcome of the actions. We shouldn't get angry with God and say, oh, God, I made so much effort for this, and it was a good thing that I was trying for. I wasn't trying for any bad thing. Why didn't you allow this to happen? Why did you bring about this bad consequence? People say they get angry with God sometimes, but we have no right to get angry with God. That is, we do what we consider right. the fruit is according to his will.
All right. So thank you, Michael. So going back to the question, the two statements, everything that we experience is nothing but a projection of our vasanas. And the second statement, whatever we experience is part of God's will. They are not really contradictory. The latter statement is actually contained in A. Whatever we experience is coming out of our vasanas, but for each birth, God selects from that pool what we need to experience for that particular birth.
Exactly.
So with that, I'll let Rebecca go for the next question. Go ahead.
Thanks, Michael. It always is helpful to me to have an example, and because everything you said, there's so many, it just spurs so many thoughts. And every time I talk to you, you always bring up the being on the bus and putting your load down. So I'm sure that's what this is all going to boil down to anyway, but nevertheless.
Okay.
So let's say the prarabdha karma that I I'm looking at is the experience of eating food and food choices. And specifically not wanting to eat sugar and sweets and things like that. So I have the freedom, ostensibly, to make choices that would support that. Whether or not that results in a healthy body or anything like that is out of my hands, because that's the prarabdha karma. And then where I get tied up in knots is that ostensibly have the choice, because it feels like an addiction or it's out of my hands. And then where my mind goes is, well, it's just part of my prarabdha karma to have this particular issue in my life. And so when you say we have the moral responsibility to make the choices that are supportive and blah, 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 it's like, well, yeah, but that, how do we let go of that? And this is just a mundane thing. It can be, it can be exploded into much more heavy, things.
Whatever we cannot avoid what we are destined to experience. In order for us to experience what we are destined to experience, certain actions are necessary on our part. Those actions we will be made to do by God. That's the first sentence of the note that Bhagavan wrote for his mother. In accordance with the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that, meaning God or Guru, being there, implying in the heart of each of them, will cause to dance. So he will make us act in accordance with prarabdha. So supposing it's your prarabdha today to eat a tasty meal. So you will in order to eat that tasty meal, supposing there's no restaurant or anything to go to, so you have to cook it. So you go to a supermarket, you buy the ingredients, you cook the food, and you experience the food. So you couldn't have experienced that food if it were not part of your prarabdha. And in order for you to experience that, you had to do certain actions. So you can say those actions of going to a supermarket, buying the ingredients, cooking it, and eating it, that is all actions you're made to do in accordance with your prarabdha. You're made to do those actions by God. But just because you're made to do the actions by God does not mean necessarily that you are not doing an agamya. An agamya means actions that you do in accordance with your vasanas. So you were destined to have that meal, and so you had to go through those actions. But you also had a liking to enjoy that meal. So when you went to the supermarket, you were going to the supermarket in accordance with the will of God, but you're also going with in your mind lots of desires. I will buy this ingredient, that ingredient, and today I'll I'll make a nice sweet dish, so I'll buy sugar or whatever. I know I shouldn't buy sugar, but anyway, I'll buy it because I like it. So we cannot easily separate, that is, we cannot, well, not separate, let's put it this way. We cannot determine to what extent any action we do is driven by God in accordance with our prarabdha, and to what extent it's driven by our will. In many cases, both are working side by side. It's our prarabdha to enjoy that meal, and it's we're doing the agamya because we have a liking to enjoy that meal. Sometimes sometimes our will happens to coincide with God's will. But many times our will and God's will don't coincide. It may be our will to, it may be God's will, but we should eat sugar excessively and get diabetes and get serious health problems. That is according to prarabdha. But we were also having that liking for that. So we can't say, it's not my responsibility, it's all God's fault. God made me eat so much sugar. And yes, it is according to his will, because that's your destiny. But your will is also, so whatever we may be experiencing, our will is constantly playing a role there. Only if we are completely surrendered, if we take the luggage off our head and put it on the luggage rack and let things happen as they happen, be indifferent to everything, that they have no likes or dislikes or desires or attachments or anything, then only we can say everything is according to God's will. Whatever we experience is whatever we are given to experience is according to God's will, but our own will is also there. So, but how to give up all our likes, dislikes, desires, and attachment? By the practice of sadhana, by the practice of surrender, we can, to some extent, reduce the strength of our likes, dislikes, desires, and attachment. So when difficulties come in our life, we accept it as God's will. We don't get angry with God, and yes, it's God's will. And slowly, we try to reduce our likes and dislikes. But we can never be completely free of likes and dislikes, so long as we rise as ego. So it's in order to completely surrender our will to God, we need to surrender ourselves to God, because it's the very nature of ego to have a will of its own. As ego, we will always have likes and dislikes. We may be able to reduce the strength of our likes and dislikes and our desires and so on, but we will always have them so long as we rise as ego. But in order to annihilate this ego, we can annihilate ego only if we're willing to surrender ourselves completely. So in order to be willing to surrender ourselves completely, we need to have already reduced our likes and dislikes to a considerable extent. So long as we have strong likes and dislikes, we're not going to be willing to surrender ourselves. So reducing our likes and dislikes, in other words, reducing the strength of our will, is a necessary part of the process. And how we do that? By this practice of Atma-vichara, that is the Vishaya vasanas, their inclinations towards Vishayas, that means phenomena. So the Vishaya vasanas take our mind outwards. Vasanas gain their strength from us. The more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vasana, the stronger that vasana becomes. So if you have a liking for sugar, and you eat sugar more and more and more, the more you indulge in that liking, the stronger it will become. If you want to give up the liking for sugar, you need to say, sugar is bad for my health. My health is more important than this this fleeting experience of sweetness on my tongue. So you have to use viveka, you have to use discrimination. And you need to have vairagya. You need to be willing to set aside that desire. If you are able to avoid eating sugar for several months or several years, you will find the liking for that will decrease. This is very clearly seen in the case of people who give up smoking. Giving up smoking is a struggle for people at first. Once they've given up smoking, many people who were smokers in the past, they say now, I cannot imagine how I ever had a liking for that. Because they didn't allow themselves to be swayed by that vasana to smoke, it slowly became weaker and weaker and weaker and eventually diminished. So when we're practicing self-attentiveness, we are not just avoiding one vasana. We're avoiding all vasanas. That is, avoiding means we're avoiding being swayed by any Vishaya vasana whatsoever. So long as we're holding on to self-attentiveness, there'll be so much inclination we have to think about this or to think about that. But if we hold on to the self-attentiveness without allowing our mind to be carried away by those thoughts, by those inclinations will grow weaker and weaker. So by resisting the temptation to smoke or resisting the temptation to eat sugar, you are tackling one vasana. But you're strengthening the vasana of I want to be healthy. So you can say you're strengthening the attachment you've got to, but it's just replacing one vasana with another vasana. Whereas when we attend to ourselves, we are weakening all Vishaya vasanas. And we are strengthening the one vasana that is to our advantage, namely the sat vasana, the inclination just to be as we are. The inclination to hold on to our being and thereby subside and be as we are.
So it's not about making it about the smoking or the sugar or the whatever. Those are just the what's. The how is really letting go of the thinking and the
liking for that. Yes,
yes.
Yeah.
Which the liking, which is cultivated through the thinking.
Yeah. Well, no. Thinking is driven by the liking. It's the vasanas, but the vasanas are the seeds. Vasanas are, in their subtlest form, we call them inclinations. The word vasana means inclination. The inclination, if we allow that inclination to sprout, it becomes a liking. And if we allow that liking to become stronger, it becomes a desire.
Okay. That's
that is, you can like something without desiring it. You see a beautiful, you see something, you see something in the shop, you see some beautiful painting or something. Oh, it's a beautiful painting, I like it. But you don't necessarily desire to have it.
Yeah, right.
So that is the will in its subtlest form of the vasanas. Stronger than the vasanas are the likes and dislikes. I mean, when the vasanas sprout, they become likes and dislikes. When they blossom fully, they become desires and attachments.
And that's where the thinking is.
Yeah. But all thoughts are driven by likes and dislikes ultimately.
Okay.
Why do we think about certain things? Because we like to think about them.
Yeah. Okay.
So we need not worry about the actions. We can solve this problem only at the root, at the subtler level. If we allow our mind to get carried away by the vasanas, those vasanas will develop into likes and dislikes. If we allow ourselves to be carried away by those likes and dislikes, they'll become desire. If we allow ourselves to be carried away further, it'll become greed, selfishness, envy, jealousy, all these things. It all depends how much we allow the mind to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's at that subtle level of where the inclination to even let our mind go towards those things. That's the starting point. That's why Bhagavan says we need to crush the serpent in the egg itself.
Mm.
And he says in Nana, as and when each thought arises, then and there, it's necessary to destroy it in the very place from which it rises. And we destroy it by holding on to self-attentiveness.
Thank you, Michael.
Right.
So that last section, Michael, was very, very clear. And I think I understand what Bhagavan is saying. If I got it right, you're saying that the goal isn't to control our behavior or our thoughts, but rather to focus on the sattvasana and look within.
Yeah, we're not focusing on the sattvasana. We are focusing on
we're
sat.
being.
Yeah.
Okay. In that case, are you saying essentially let go of what happens or doesn't happen, and don't focus there? Whether it's destined or not destined will obviously appear.
Yeah.
The arrow will do what the arrow does, but we have no control over the arrow once it leaves our hands.
Yeah. So we shouldn't. That is the reason Bhagavan taught us the law of karma as he taught it, is not for us to puzzle about, is this prarabdha or is this agamya and all these things. The reason is to make us understand, even if we do agamya, that even if we act in accordance with our vasanas, we are not going to achieve anything in this life, because what we're destined to experience, we're going to experience. What we're not destined to experience, we're not going to experience. So we cannot change the preordained course of events, however much we like to and however much we try to.
Right.
So,
excuse me.
So if we understand that, we will understand there's no point in thinking about, in even worrying about these things. And should I act like, should I do this or should I do that? Bhagavan said, instead of, when that one in the 13th paragraph of Nana, he says, when that one Parameshwara Shakti, that supreme divine ruling power, is driving all karyas, making everything happen as it's meant to happen, and making us act as we're meant to act, why should we, instead of yielding ourselves to it, be constantly thinking it's necessary to do like this, it's necessary to do like that? So Bhagavan is saying we shouldn't even think about our actions. We should just hold on to self-attentiveness and thereby surrender ourselves.
So therefore, we don't puzzle whether it's agamya or divine will.
Yeah.
We're compelled to do the actions by either divine will, the prarabdha, or agamya, but it ultimately doesn't matter because the arrow is going to hit what the arrow is going to hit.
Yeah. The agamya is just creating fruit for future experience, but it's not changing anything here.
Right.
So, but the cause of agamya is our Vishaya vasanas. As Bhagavan says in the second verse of Upadeshandya, the fruit of action passes away.
Right.
That is, anything we experience is the fruit of our past action. Once we've experienced that fruit, the fruit is finished. Just like you can't eat the same mango twice. Once you've eaten the mango, it's finished. So he says the fruit of action perishing, that is when we experience it, it's perished, yet it remains in the form of a seed. That seed is what makes us fall in the great ocean of action. That seed is the vasanas.
Right.
So it's the vasanas of a problem. So it's at that level that we need to tackle the problem.
Right. So would we say that 100% of all things that actually occur are prarabdha?
everything.
Not our actions, not our actions to try to change things.
Yeah,
or
that's
make
why I
them
say everything that happens to us is
Exactly.
prarabdha.
right. Okay.
We
Okay.
can't say everything that happens by us is prarabdha.
Right. Right. I understand. I think I understand this. So can you just spell that out?
I robbed the bank yesterday, but that was my prarabdha. So when the police come and catch me and take me to court, I can say, no, I'm innocent. It was my prarabdha. But I'm not going to get away with it like that.
No, but the fact that it happened.
Well,
You see where I'm going?
Yeah, let's not try and.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay, okay. Yeah,
if the police catch me and if I'm put in prison, yes, that's all prarabdha. But
right.
the point is, when I went and robbed the bank, it may have been my prarabdha to do that, but I also did it because I had a liking to do it.
I wanted
And
to. Okay.
also another thing we need to remember, the prarabdha is tailor-made to suit each individual. So, for example, if you're basically a good-natured person, if you've given up a lot of the grosser desires and everything, you're not going to have a prarabdha to be Al Capone or some gangster or something like that. The people who have a prarabdha to be a gangster, it's because that is what matches their vasanas. So people who have a prarabdha to lead a basically good life, it's because that matches with their prarabdha. So a person who has, to a considerable extent, reduced the strength of their likes and dislikes and so on, is not going to live the life of a criminal. It just won't happen. Because they just won't have any inclination to do that. So they won't be given a prarabdha. I mean, the prarabdha matches the
Right.
inclinations that we have.
Right. Because they're all
Yeah.
Vasana driven.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to take up any more time, but that really helped. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna just read a couple of questions that pertain to this topic. So hopefully, then we can move on to the next one. So Rabbi there is asking, who is the God who decides what we will experience? Is it a construct because our awareness or Brahman doesn't do anything, like the sun in whose presence the flowers bloom?
Yes, that is. God is the doer. That God is called Karta, the doer, because He's the one who selects and allots the fruit of our past actions. But He does that without doing anything. That is, God is our own reality, our own real nature, Atma-vichara. So though we see God as something other than ourselves, God doesn't see us as other than Himself. So because He knows us to be nothing other than Himself, He loves us as Himself. So the infinite love that He has for us is what we experience as His grace. And by the power of His grace, everything is happening as it's meant to happen. That's why Bhagavan often said, God does everything without doing anything. Of course, our minds cannot adequately understand this. How can He do without doing? But what it means is everything happens as it's meant to happen. As he says in the 15th paragraph of Nana, Isan Sanidana Visesha Matratal. He says all the Panchakriyas, the 5 divine functions, creation, sustenance, dissolution, Tirodhana, that's veiling, and Anugraha, grace, all of these happen by the Isan Sanidana Visesha Matratal. That means by the by the mere special nature of the presence of God. So just by his being as his presence means his being. By his being as he is, everything happens as it's meant to happen. So
Right.
God is not our idea of God may be a construct, but God himself is not a construct. He's our own reality. He's the sole reality.
So along those lines, Sylvia asks, we discussed Brahman and non-duality, then how is God different from all of us?
God is not different from any of us. We seem to be different. We seem to be separate from God because we've risen as ego. By rising as ego, we've limited ourselves with this body. So we seem to be separate from the, I experience myself as finite, so I seem to be something different to the infinite whole that is God. But actually, no finite thing can be other than the infinite. Because if anything were other than the infinite would thereby be limited and it would no longer be infinite. So none of us are other than God. God is always our own reality. The separation exists only in our view because we identify ourselves as a set of adjuncts. That's what Bhagavan says in verse 24, I think, yes, 24 of Upadeshundya. Irkum ikayal isa jivagal oruporle ava undipara upadi unave verundipara. That means by their being nature, God and soul are just one substance. That is, in our being, we are nothing other than him. We are nothing other than God. Upadi unave veru undi veru. That is, it's this awareness, this adjunct awareness that makes us seem to be different. Because we are aware of ourselves as I am this body is an adjunct, an upadi. Upadi means something that we wrongly take ourselves to be. So this body is an upadi. By identifying ourselves with this upadi, we seemingly separate ourselves from God, the one infinite whole. But we are never actually separate from him.
Right. Thank you, Michael. Richard asks, are not vasanas and prarabdha grace? All is only the grace of consciousness, is it not?
Vasanas are function as tirodhana, as the veiling. It's our likes and dislikes and desires and attachments that bind us to this body and world, and thereby obscure our real nature. Grace is that power that removes this veiling, this clouding, and gives us the clarity to see ourselves as we actually are. Ultimately, there's only one power. We use that one power now in the form of Maya, which is what is veiling us, because of our likes and dislikes and desires and attachments. So because we are misusing the power of grace, we experience it as Maya. When by grace we are given the clarity to understand that we're going in the wrong direction and we want to return back to our source, then we begin to experience grace as it actually is, the power that draws us back within. But grace and Maya actually are the same power. We are just, when we misuse the grace, we call it Maya. When we yield ourselves to it and allow it to use us, we call it grace.
Thank you, Michael. So Richard also asks, is the sattvasana like the wood that's stirring the funeral pyre?
Yes, well, in that, and the analogy Bhagavan says, he says the thought, who am I? When he says the thought, who am I, he means the investigation, who am I? He's using the word thought in a metaphorical sense to refer to the vichara, in other words, the self-attentiveness. So the self-attentiveness is the stick that's stirring the funeral power. What gives us the liking to be self-attentive, that is the satvasana. So it's under the sway of satvasana, but we try to hold on to self-attentiveness. And holding on to self-attentiveness is stirring the funeral pyre.
So the satvasana is a prelude to the stirring the funeral pyre.
It's not even a prelude. It's the
liking to do that.
It's the liking to do it.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
it's a driving force.
Right. Okay. Think we probably would like to close this discussion on karma, unless anybody else has any questions on this. So if not,
we can leave karma and go back to being.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
That's
I really
our
want
aim.
to close this out. So, okay,
We
Ram,
should always
please.
remember all these teachings about karma is to make us understand that we need not think about karma. We need to think only about our being. We need to be self-attentive.
Right. Go ahead, Ram. So let's.
Michael, I think you may have hit the nail for me with that last comment there. What I was trying to figure out is there is a lot of explanation on free will and all that we talked earlier, and then vasanas is the other thing that we talked about, and then karma. I mean, it can get, for a dumbhead like me, pretty confusing pretty fast. So is sticking to the self-investigation, which is who is getting these thoughts about vasanas and karma and free will. Who is the one who is getting these thoughts and investigating who that is that sufficient, or do I need to understand
That is all that
this?
is necessary. That is all that is necessary. But Bhagavan's teachings give us clarity to help us to understand what we are doing, why we're doing it. Because in order to hold on to self-attentiveness, that requires great love. And we will have great love. That is if we understand Bhagavan's teachings clearly, that will increase our love to be self-attentive.
But
So
this vasanas and karma and all that is still, these are just thoughts, isn't it? I mean, the vasanas, how did they come?
Vasanas are the seeds that give rise to thoughts.
Right, but that seed came because it's a repetition of a thought over multiple lives or whatever. How did the vasana come into existence?
Well, the vasana came, as soon as we rise as ego, vasanas come into existence, because the very nature of ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, grasping form, it comes into being. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. So the very nature of ego is to grasp form. Since ego is formless, whatever forms it grasps are things other than itself. So what he refers to there as form is what is otherwise called Vishaya. So attending to Vishayas, attending to phenomena, is the very nature of ego. Ego cannot come into being, it cannot stand, and it cannot feed itself and flourish without constantly attending to phenomena, attending to Vishayas. So that liking to attend to Vishayas, that inclination to attend to Vishayas, it's the very nature of ego to have that liking. The liking is not ego, but it's the nature of ego to have that liking. So as soon as we rise as ego, we rise along with vasanas.
how did the vasana come into existence? Some people have
I
one
just
vasana.
told you, by rising as ego, we bring the vasanas into existence. Because we cannot rise as ego without having these vasanas. That is, it's the very nature of ego to have vasanas.
But
Because ego's nature is clinging.
right,
And that inclination to cling is the nature of ego to have that inclination to cling.
the one person has one dominant vasana, the other person has another dominant vasana. Both rise as ego and both come up with different vasanas.
Well, we all have the basic vasana, the vasana to hold on to this body as I.
Okay.
From that, so many other vasanas come. According to which vasanas we allow ourselves to be swayed by, vasanas multiply themselves. So if we allow ourselves to be, supposing you have an inclination to keep bad company. When you keep bad company, you'll pick up so many other inclinations. You'll pick up inclinations to drink alcohol, to take drugs, to cheat people, to do this. So one vasana, the vasana to keep bad company, leads to so many other vasanas. On the other hand, if you have the inclination to keep good company, then you'll slowly start imbibing good habits. So when we follow any particular vasana, that vasana will the other vasanas will sprout from that.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And then hopefully this last question on this topic, I think Sarah asks, so hi Michael, on the issue of free will, isn't the higher intelligence Atman the one also shaping the actions? Does that intelligence not make us act in certain ways that result in the outcome that was predestined?
To call Atman in the sense of what we actually are, to call it the higher, it may seem to be intelligence from our point of view, but it's much more than intelligence. Atman is pure awareness. That is what we actually are, is pure awareness. Intelligence is a function of the mind. It's a function of the intellect. So sorry, I haven't answered the question. I first said we shouldn't think of it just in terms of intelligence.
So what you're saying is, does that Atman not make us act in certain ways that result in the outcome that was predestined?
Atman is pure being. So Atman doesn't prompt us to act in any way. Then Atman means what we actually are. Our real nature is just being. What the action begins only with our rising as ego. So our rising as ego is the beginning of all action.
Yeah.
I guess my question is very related with this, if I can.
Yes, yes.
So exactly at that point, Michael, so investigating about this is a dream, obviously, and now it's clear to me that everything is empty because there's the substance that is invisible to me. But the question is, asking who is the dreamer, then I see that our own being is only being, is not dreaming. Yes. So the dreamer is imaginary, but that imagination, who had that imagination of being a dreamer or the dreaming? I guess it's kind of like...
It's all ego. Ego is the dreamer. And ego exists only in its own view. Ego is its own construct. But if we, so long as we're looking outwards, we seem to be ego. So ego now seems to be very real because the I that is experiencing all this is ego. But if we turn our attention back to ourselves to see who am I, to see what we actually are, there's no such thing as ego to be found. we seem to be ego only when we're not looking at ourselves. When we look at ourselves, all that remains is pure awareness. If we look at ourselves deeply enough, keenly enough.
Yeah, because in there you don't enter with the mind, so it's just the mind is not there, so it's just.
Yeah. Yes. Well, only when we rise as ego do we talk about mind and body and world and all these other things. So the root problem is our rising as ego. We rise as ego by looking at other things. When we, instead of looking at other things, if we look at ourselves, if we attend to ourselves, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside. If we look at ourselves keenly enough, carefully enough, we will see what we actually are is just pure awareness. As soon as we as ego experience ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego and remain as pure awareness. Pure awareness is what we always actually are.
That's why when we look at the dreamer, there's no dreamer, there's nothing to look at.
Yes.
Because it's non-existent.
Yes.
It's only inside.
But so long as we're dreaming, we cannot deny the existence of dreamer. There can't be a dream without a dreamer. But the dreamer is not real. The dreamer is no more real than the dream. So if instead of attending to a dream, if we attend to a dreamer, the dreamer will subside and the pure being awareness alone will remain.
And that's how we actually are more at service of whatever it needs to be done, because we're just being and we will be moved.
Yeah. That is, we will not do anything. Our mind, speech, and body will be made to do whatever they're meant to do. But because we're subsiding, we are dissociating ourselves from this body and mind. We are letting go of this false identification, I am this body. That is, so long as we're attending to anything else, we are firmly identified with this body. But when we begin to look within, we begin to separate ourselves from this body and mind. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you, Michael. So next question from Michael Fenton. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Michael, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my question is going back to the original, when we were talking about Bhagavan not being in the body at all. You were saying, from our perspective, we see Bhagavan in a body, but really he's not in the body. And so my question, I got to give you a little bit of background. So I've been fascinated by Advaita Vedanta for 5 years, and obsessed would be a better word. So I've watched many teachers, like hundreds of teachers, right?
Yes.
And for me, it comes down to there are 100 teachers with a tremendous amount of knowledge, and then there's Bhagavan. And there's a huge divide there.
Huge.
Every other teacher seems to have the knowledge, but it's sort of conflated with a certain amount of ego, where Bhagavan, you can sense that it is
it's something completely different.
Pure. It's pure.
It's very easy to read some books, to learn something about Advaita. It's very easy to talk about Advaita, but to live Advaita is quite a different thing. Yes. That is what we are trying to do. We're trying to live it by, so long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves, we're not experiencing Advaita. We're experiencing subject and object. The only way to experience Advaita, to experience non-duality, experience one without a second, is to attend to ourself. So by attending to ourself, we are trying to, not merely to talk Advaita or think about Advaita, we're trying to actually live Advaita, to be Advaita. That is other than that, if Advaita is just a philosophy, if it's just a set of nice ideas, clever talk, and impressing others, that's not going to do any good to us whatsoever. When death comes, even if we've mastered all the Upanishads, all the Bhagavad Gita, the Brahma Sutra, all the commentaries and all the different versions, interpretations of it, and so on and so forth, how is that going to help us when death comes? We need to be, while life is still here in the body, we need to be trying to live Advaita by holding on to self-attentiveness.
Now, can I ask you another question?
Yes.
Do you believe that any other being has attained the level that, like complete, total, absolute dissolution into the absolute consciousness? Like, what about Sri Sadhu Om? Like,
I don't believe any being can attain that. It is not a matter of attaining something. It's a matter of losing ourselves in our own being, our own reality. So it's a matter of Atma-samapanam, self-surrender, giving ourselves up completely.
Do you think Sri
Only
Sadhu
by giving ourselves up completely do we remain as we actually are. Then we are no longer a person.
Yeah.
And so long as we're asking questions about others, as Bhagavan said, that's not Atma-vichara, that's Anatma-vichara. We're investigating the not self. So what's it matter? Let everyone be a Jnani. What is it to us? Who am I is what we need to know. We're not here to investigate who is he, who is she. Is this one a Jnani? Is that one a Jnani? Or maybe they are a Jnani, maybe they're not a Jnani. Why to think about others at all? Who am I? That is what Bhagavan has asked us to investigate.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael.
Sometimes when people used to talk about other people in Bhagavan's presence, and sometimes there'd be hot discussions about whether such and such a person is a Jnani or not. And then if someone would ask Bhagavan, is this person a Jnani? Bhagavan often used to reply, there is only one Jnani, you are that. Know yourself and you know the only Jnani there is. When we talk about multiple Jnanis, we are taking those Jnanis to be the body. But the Jnani is never the body. So Jnana is one and Jnani is one. Because Jnana, as Bhagavan often used to say, Jnana me Jnani. Jnana alone is the Jnani. Jnana means pure awareness. Only pure awareness can know pure awareness. And pure awareness knows pure awareness just by being pure awareness. So we need to be that. That's all there is to it. Thinking about others and whether they're Jnanis or Ajnanis, it's futile. It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of Bhagavan's teachings.
Thank you, Michael. Sanjay Lohia, please go ahead.
Yes, please. Yes. So, sir, I'll be reading an extract from the Path of Sri Ramana, 2023 edition, pages 189 and 190.
Right.
So over here, Sadhu Om says, as countless people of different characteristics exist in each religion, it is impossible to compel all of them that they should direct their love and devotional practices towards only one specified God. If a religion does not permit its followers to have these dissimilarities in the feeling of love and different forms of worship as desired, it will slowly fade away as it fails to fulfill the great desire of their mind. Only those religions that allow amongst their followers in one way or the other the differential expressions of love as seen in the 5 standards of our bhakti school flourish for a long time in the world. So this is what Sadhu Om says there.
Yes.
My question, sir, is how should we understand Islam and Buddhism and such religions in this regard? Because they are flourishing, Buddhism and Islam, they are flourishing, but they do not allow, according to me, differential expressions. I don't understand.
Well, even in Islam, which is a very regimented. I mean, they've got one book and everyone has to follow that book. But there's so many different. There's Sunni Muslims and there's Shia Muslims, and there are Sufis, and so inevitably the same. As Bhagavan said, according to the purity of the Antakarana, the same teachings will reflect in different ways. So they may all read the Quran, but each one will understand the Quran in their own way. So inevitably, there will be differences within any religion. But I think what Sadhu Om is hinting at there, those religions that are most nourishing to the soul are those religions that have ample room for plenty of diversity. Hinduism is a religion, but is not a single religion. Hinduism is a whole family of religions. There are so many different sampradayas, so many different philosophies, so many different theologies, so many different gods, so many different paths, so many different, because there's something for everyone. So, and because it allows freedom, it allows people to grow in the appropriate way according to their nature. So it's a more fruitful religion in that it's catering for so many different needs, more than every religion caters for a variety of needs, but I think Hinduism is the religion, but more than any other religion, there's a huge variety within Hinduism. There's something for everyone.
That makes more sense, sir.
But another thing about a lot of religions that is really the real purpose of a religion, or the heart of a religion, is coming close to God, coming close to the reality. But the majority of followers of any religion tend to take just the outward forms of a religion, and they identify themselves with that outward form. I am a Christian, I am a Muslim, I am a Hindu, I am a Buddhist, I am a Sikh, I am a Jain. This is identification. This has nothing to do with real religion, just saying I am this or I am that. And also, a lot of religions prescribe certain beliefs. You should believe this. So it's religion in its most outward form is very different to spirituality, because in its most outward form, religion is about identification. Firstly, you identify yourself as a member of a certain group. I belong to such and such a religion, such and such a church, such a sampradaya, and unquestionably accepting the tenets of that religion. That is the most worldly expression of religion, whereas spirituality is not about identification. It's about questioning our identity. It's not about saying I am a Hindu, I am a Vedantin, I am an Advaitin, I am a devotee of Ramana. It's about who am I, investigating what this I is. So it's not about taking on a new identity, but questioning our identity. And questioning means not just questioning verbally or mentally, but questioning, actually investigating. And also, it's not about taking on new beliefs. It's questioning the very basis of all our beliefs. So Bhagavan doesn't give us new things to believe. He just makes us question all our old beliefs. Before coming to Bhagavan, we take ourselves to be the body, we take the world to be real. But Bhagavan prompts us to question these things and to question all that we have till now taken for granted. So that is the real spirituality. So there's a vast spectrum between the pure spirituality, as expressed in Bhagavan's teachings, for example, and the most worldly expression of religion, which is about where you try and forcibly convert others, where you fight wars over. So many wars have been fought over religion throughout the history of humanity. That has nothing to do with the spirituality. That is so there's vast differences. So the one of the beauties about Hinduism is its diversity and its acceptance of diversity. When Christian missionaries, Jesuit monks, first came to India, there's apparently something written by some Jesuit who came in the 15th or 16th century to Singhi. Singhi is a town not far from Tiruvannamalai. There used to be a hill fort there and a palace and everything. When he came there, he wrote the letter back. He was from Stone, I think. He wrote the letter back saying, describing Singhi, saying it is far more advanced than any city in Europe. Because in those days, cities in Europe, the roads weren't paved, there was no proper drainage and everything. But he said, he described how they had good drainage system and roads were paved and everything. And he also said it would be very easy to convert these people, because when I went to the king and I told him about our religion, he gave me money to build a church. Because Hinduism is always ready for diversity.
Yeah.
But of course, he didn't convert them, because the king just said, if you want to worship your God, okay, you build your temple to your God. That's fine.
There's one point I wanted to mention to Sanjay is like, why pick on just Islam and Buddhism? I mean, that thinking is there in all faiths, including Hinduism, right? I mean, like, my God is the only God, the supreme God is there.
Yeah.
I hear it from my fellow Hindus all the time too, you know. So I think we shouldn't. The non-dualism is maybe more prevalent in Hinduism, but that doesn't mean we have a monopoly there. You know, it's now flourishing in all the other faiths, God's grace, in Islam. And I just meet with people, with Muslims all the time. Our group has a lot of Muslims. When the non-dualistic thinking is now getting into all the faiths.
And it's not a new thing. That is Sufis. There was always a lot of affinity between Sufism and Advaita.
Right. So I think sorry, 1 second. Yeah, I just wanted to make one point clear. Yeah. What I'm looking at in those sentences of Swami Sadhu Om is that what will slowly and eventually die off is such thinking, where everyone says, my God is the only God. That is going as more and more as people evolve with time. It could be hundreds of years, thousands of years, but that thinking will slowly and eventually die off. And what will really flourish is the non-dualistic thinking. And that day was going to come one day. It could take many, many years. It could take millennia, but that will come in one day. I think that's what he's pointing out.
Well, I think also there'll never be a time when all are thinking in that way. But one benefit in the modern day world, for example, if you were born in Europe a few hundred years ago, you would know nothing except Christianity. that was the only thing they knew. But nowadays, people know so much about other religions. And if we are open-minded, we can see in every religion there are good aspects and there are bad aspects. There are good manifestations of religion and bad manifestations of religion. So, and the choice is there for all of us nowadays. We can be born in, for example, I was born in a Christian country. I was brought up as a Roman Catholic. That way didn't appeal to me. So I was looking for something deeper, and I found that in Bhagavan. I'm not saying there are not deeper aspects of in Christianity or Roman Catholicism, but I didn't come across it, or I didn't come across anything that satisfied me until I came to Bhagavan. So because of the nature of the modern day world, not only is there commercial globalization, there's also cultural and religious globalization. So these things are spreading, and people have far more opportunity to consider other ways. But ultimately, all these questions need not concern us too much, because these are all about the world.
Exactly.
We are here to find out, who am I?
Right. I hope that answers your question,
Yeah,
Sanjay.
yeah, thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank
Thanks,
you.
sir.
There's a couple of questions pertaining to the practice of self-attention, and with that, we'll close out today's session. A lady by name Johan sent me an email, and apparently she posted a question to you on June 4th. Did you have a session on June 4th?
Yeah, I had a meeting with her.
Okay, and so she's trying to follow up on it.
Yeah.
So following up on our conversation, we talked about the fact that it is important to practice self-attentiveness in every occasion possible, not just when sitting down in a calm environment. But when walking, doing the dishes, cooking, all the phenomena are functions, right? All actions like smelling, hearing, feeling, etc., being in motion, I find it more difficult when I'm doing those actions to focus on myself. That is to be self-attentive. It is very subtle. It might go for a second, but right back to hearing the sound of birds, feeling my feet on the ground, taking care of the knife, cutting the veggies, and so forth. So my attention goes where the movements are. The focus is very easy to get disturbed. So I imagine it'll come with practice, but you were mentioning while speaking that in fact practicing while having activities will indeed help to deepen the practice while sitting. Can you help me with this?
Yes. That is when Bhagavan talked about Atma-vichara, for example, in the 16th paragraph of Nana, he says, he defined what he means by Atma-vichara. He says, always, that is, the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. In other words, to put it in simple terms, Atma-vichara, or self-investigation, is always keeping our mind on ourselves. Keeping our mind on ourselves means keeping the attention on ourselves. But he starts that sentence by saying sada kalamam, which means always. So that makes it very clear. Obviously, Bhagavan doesn't expect us all to hold on to self-attentiveness all the time. That is because we have such strong Vishaya vasanas, that's just not going to happen. At least it's not going to happen now. But our aim should be to be self-attentive as much as possible. He says in another place, in the 11th paragraph, he says, Oruvantan Sarupam Adayam Varayal, Nirantara Swarupa Smaranaye Kaipatravanayan Adu Andre Podam. This is a very important sentence. That means until one attains Swarupa, Swarupa means what we actually are, our real nature. until one attains Swarupa, if one holds on to uninterrupted self-remembrance, that alone is sufficient. So all we have to do is to try to hold on to that self-remembrance. Self-remembrance is another way of saying self-attentiveness. But though it's another way of saying it, it's actually a very nice clue, because a lot of people have difficulty grasping what is meant by self-attentiveness. But we all know that we are. We all know I am. We all know I. There's no one who doesn't know I. All we have to do is to remember I. Not to remember what we take ourselves to be, not to remember this body or mind that we mistake ourselves to be, but to remember that awareness I that mistakes itself to be these things. So keeping our attention on ourselves, remembering ourselves, is what we should be trying to do all the time. Normally, when we're engaged in other activities, walking or driving a car or cooking or cleaning the house or washing the clothes or whatever it may be, having bath or whatever, usually our minds are full of so many other thoughts. We think about this and that. Even when we're cutting veggies, well, obviously we need to pay a certain amount of attention so we don't cut our fingers, but while cutting those veggies, we'll be thinking about other things. Sadhu Om often used to say this. He said, in the course of the day, 99% of the thoughts we think are not immediately relevant to the task at hand. Our mind is always dwelling on things other than the task at hand. Bhagavan isn't saying we shouldn't attend to what we are doing. We can attend to it, but most of the actions we do in the day actually require only a little bit of attention. Even something like driving a car, which is a very responsible activity, because if you're careless, you can have an accident, you can hit someone, or you can cause fatal accident. So yeah, obviously attention is needed. But if someone is accustomed to driving a car, they're able to drive a car perfectly well with actually very little attention. Supposing you were driving your car and you were trying to attend to everything, you were trying to attend to the car next door, the red light, this, that. If you're trying to attend to so many things, you won't be driving the car so efficiently. So actually you drive the car better when your mind is on other things. Because naturally, because of the responsibility of driving a car, maybe some 1 or 2% of attention is necessary. You give that naturally, and it works very well. If you try to attend to too many things, you won't be doing it so efficiently. So most of the activities we do in the day don't take up all our attention. There'll be so many other thoughts going through our mind in the midst of doing whatever activities we may be doing. So what Sadhu Om said, if those 99% of thoughts that are not actually necessary for the task at hand, if you replace those 99% of thoughts with self-attentiveness, then the 1% of attention that is given to other activities is not going to be a problem for you, because most of your attention will be on yourself. So if we think about it, we don't have difficulty thinking about other things when we're cutting the veggies or when we're walking or anything. Yes, a certain amount of attention is necessary when we're walking along the street. We don't want to walk into a lamppost or bump into other people. So, but most of the time when we're walking, very little attention is actually on the walking. So we can perfectly well do activities while holding on to what Bhagavan used to, Sadhu Om put it in English, but he said Bhagavan used to say this. So I don't know exactly what words Bhagavan used in Tamil, but Sadhu Om in English used to say, a tenuous current of self-remembrance. So we can hold on to that tenuous current of self-remembrance, even in the midst of our activities. Or at least we can try to do so. In practice, because of pramada, because of negligence or inattentiveness, often our mind gets carried away by other thoughts. But when we notice it's being carried away by other thoughts, we can bring it back to self-remembrance. So we can try to hold on to self-remembrance, whatever activities we may be doing. If we are able to, that is, the more we are able to hold on to, the more we practice and gain the skill to hold on to self-attentiveness. The skill means the liking to do so. Throughout the other activities, when we come to sit quietly, or lie down quietly, or whatever it is, not the position of the body that matters, but when we there's nothing else taking up our attention, we try to go deeper within, we will be able to go deeper within because of the practice we've been doing at other times. If we are not able to hold on to self-attentiveness in the midst of other activities, even when we sit to be self-attentive, we won't be so deeply self-attentive, because what distracts us is not actually anything external. It is our own vasanas, our own liking to attend to things other than ourselves. That is what distracts us. And those vasanas are active throughout the waking and dream state. So even when we sit for meditation, we're trying to fix our attention on ourselves, the vasanas will be rising, and very easily we can get carried away by them. So if we cannot hold on to self-attentiveness in the midst of other activities, we will not be able to hold on to it when sitting for meditation. And if we can't hold on to it while sitting for meditation, we won't be able to hold on to it in other activities. So we need to try throughout the day, whatever the mind, speech, and body may be doing, we are always aware I am. There's never a moment when we are not aware who is cutting the veggies, who is walking, who is driving the car, who is cooking, who is washing the clothes or whatever, who is taking a bath. I is the center of all our experience. I is the experiencer, and the experience is the center of all experience. So there's never a moment when we're not aware I or I am. So we can attend to ourselves if we have a liking to do so. If we find that it's very difficult to attend to ourselves in the midst of other activities, that our mind keeps on getting distracted, that is a very good measure of how successfully we're attending to ourselves when we sit in meditation. Because, as I say, if we can't do this in the midst of other activities, the same vasanas which we allowed to distract us now will be distracting us in the midst of activities. It's not what the body is doing that is distracting us. It's our liking to attend to that. Because most of the time, when we're not trying to be self-attentive, the body may be cutting veggies or whatever, but our mind is going here and there thinking about other things. So we need to try, as Bhagavan said, nirantara swarupa smarana. That means uninterrupted self-remembrance. That is what we need to aim for. We may not succeed. It doesn't matter if we don't succeed. That is what we should be trying for. We should be trying to be self-attentive as much as possible, whatever other activities we are doing or not doing. So whether we are sitting without any other activities or lying down or whatever, or whether we are engaged in other activities, we need to try to hold on to at least a certain degree of self-attentiveness, self-remembrance. The more we hold on to self-remembrance in the midst of our activities, the deeper we'll be able to go when we are not engaged in other activities. So I hope that's a clear answer to that question.
Thank you, Michael. Last question for today. In deep sleep state, I'm not aware of the body or mind or world. I could be a beggar sleeping on the streets or an insect and do not feel any pain or happiness or anything. So the question is the purpose of Atma-vichara to experience the deep sleep state while awake?
Yes, very simply. Because what we actually experience in sleep is only I am, our own being. We are not aware of anything. We are just aware I am. So that is what we are seeking to be aware of, to be exclusively aware of in the waking state when we are practicing self-attentiveness, is nothing more than what we experience in sleep. So in sleep, sleep is a state of pure awareness. There is just awareness, nothing else, no objects of awareness. No, we're not aware of time, we're not aware of space, we're not aware of body or mind or time or anything. We are just aware of being. And you can say aware of being. Being is not an object of awareness. That's why, because there are no objects of awareness, no phenomena in sleep, people wrongly think of sleep as a state of non-awareness. What we are not aware of in sleep is any phenomena. But just because we're not aware of phenomena doesn't mean that we're not aware. We're aware without being aware of anything. Well, in other words, we are aware just of our own being. That is what we are trying to experience in the waking state or dream state when we're practicing Atma-vichara. So our attention needs to be so firmly fixed on ourselves. Obviously, when we're in the midst of other activities, we won't be experiencing such a deep degree of self-attentiveness, but we try to hold on to self-attentiveness as much as possible in the midst of other activities, and to go, if we're able to hold on to self-attentiveness in the midst of other activities, when we have no other activities, we'll be able to go deeper within. It's important to understand the distinction between, that is, the sleep we are trying to experience in the waking state is what is called Jagrat Sushupti. That is wakeful sleep. That is it's called wakeful sleep because we are fully aware of our being. So we need to distinguish that from Manolaya, a state in which we lose our hold on the waking state without holding on to our being. That is, for example, when we fall asleep at night, we fall asleep because we're tired. So we're too tired to continue all this mental activity, all this attending to things other than ourselves. So we withdraw our attention from all other things and we subside in sleep. Because we subside in sleep without attending to ourselves, we rise again. Likewise, there are other states. Sleep is what is called manolaya, a temporary dissolution of mind. There are other states of temporary dissolution, such as coma or anesthesia or swoon. It can also be brought about by certain practices of pranayama and other practices. And then it's called nirvikalpa samadhi, kevala nirvikalpa samadhi. But those, as Bhagavan made clear, all those are just manolaya. They are temporary dissolution of mind. If the dissolution of mind is brought about by any means other than self-attentiveness, in the case of sleep, it's brought about by tiredness. In the case of coma, it may be brought about by a head injury. In the case of anesthesia, it's brought about by certain drugs. In the case of swoon, it may be certain circumstances can make a swoon. In the case of nirvikalpa samadhi, it's by the yoga practices. So if we bring about dissolution of the mind by any means other than self-attentiveness, the resulting state will be manolaya. it's just a temporary dissolution. The mind will rise again. But if we bring about the dissolution of mind by self-attentiveness, it will not rise again. Bringing about the dissolution of mind by self-attentiveness is what is called manonasa, the destruction or annihilation of the mind. That is, if we attend to ourselves so keenly that we thereby cease to be aware of anything else, we will then experience ourselves as pure awareness. Because we as ego thereby experience ourselves as pure awareness, as soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego and remain as pure awareness. Because ego can never experience itself as pure awareness, because ego is the false awareness, I am this body. So when ego experiences itself as pure awareness, it instantly ceases to be ego and remains as pure awareness. That state is eternal. So in order to bring about the permanent dissolution of mind, we need to practice self-attentiveness. There's no other way. What I just said doesn't mean that if we, sometimes when we are trying to be self-attentive, we lose our hold on self-attentiveness and slip into sleep. That is not brought about by self-attentiveness, but by the pramada, the losing our hold on self-attentiveness causes us to sleep. But if we hold on to the self-attentiveness until the mind dissolves, then the mind will never rise again. So that is what we're trying to achieve. We may be a long way off that, but at least we have to start from where we now stand. So at least in our present state, we may not be able to go so deep within, but we try at least to the extent possible to hold on to a tenuous current of self-remembrance or self-attentiveness, whatever else the mind, speech, and body may be doing. We may end up at the end of the day only having attended to ourselves a few moments here, a few moments there. But if we persevere slowly, those moments of self-attentiveness will get get longer and longer, and they'll occur more and more frequently. And finally, our whole life will be taken over by self-attentiveness. For this, Sadhu Om gave sorry, I know it's probably time to end, but I'll just end with a very nice story that Sadhu Om told. That is, there was a poor Arab who he made a livelihood by as a small trader. He would buy goods in a certain town, and then he would go through the desert, and he'd take them to villages, and he'd sell them, and he'd get a small profit. So that was his livelihood. And his only companion was his camel, because in order to carry all his merchandise through the desert, the camel was carrying the load for him, and he would walk beside the camel. The deserts are very, very hot in the daytime, but at night they become very cold. So at nighttime, he used to put up his little tent, and he would tie the camel outside, and he would put up his little tent and go inside the tent and sleep. One night it was particularly cold outside, and after he'd been sleeping for a little while, he woke up and he found the camel had put its nose in the tent. So he thought to himself, oh, poor camel, it's been wandering all day in the hot sun, and it's very cold outside. So yes, let its nose remain in the tent. And he went to sleep again. After some time, he found the whole head of the camel was in the tent. Again, he thought to himself, oh, poor creature, let it be there. And next time he woke up, the feet of the camel were also in the tent, well, neck of the camel, and then the feet of the camel. And by the morning, he was outside the tent, and the camel had occupied the whole tent. This is a story told by Sadhu Om. He said, likewise with self-attentiveness. We should at least allow the camel's nose to enter the tent. That is, we should at least allow a little self-attentiveness in our life. If we allow a little self-attentiveness in our life, that little will grow bigger and bigger and bigger. So the small moments of self-attentiveness will become slightly longer moments of self-attentiveness. The infrequent moments of self-attentiveness will become more frequent. And finally, the whole life will be swallowed by self-attentiveness.
Exactly.
So I think
Thank you,
that's a
Michael.
good place to end.
Exactly, yeah. That story occurs in Patha Sri Ramana, somewhere
Yeah.
in one of the footnotes.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to mention, there was a lot of questions today on karma. Please, please, please recommend everyone to read the chapter 3 of supplement in Patha Sri Ramana. There is no better write-up on karma anywhere, to my knowledge.
I have not anywhere come across such a clear explanation of the law of karma as given in that chapter. And one very, very unique thing there, when people talk about karma, they all begin from the point of we're a jiva and we're doing karma. But Sadhu Om goes right back to the beginning. He says, what we actually are is Brahman. And as Brahman, we have infinite freedom. So when we rise as ego, that our freedom is limited, but we don't completely lose our freedom. We limit our freedom. Just like our being, we don't lose our being, but we limit our being when we limit ourselves as this body. We limit our awareness, we limit our happiness, we limit our freedom. But the freedom is always there. And it's that misusing that freedom is what is doing karma. Doing karma is a misuse of our freedom. So we need to use our freedom correctly by turning within. So it's a very, very unique way he has explained it there. And he also goes into it in great detail, explaining it very, very nicely.
Right. And you know, with all respect to Michael, he's given only a small time, right? So just looking at, you're explaining nuggets here and nuggets there. It will never be as complete as reading the whole chapter.
Yes, yes.
So you'll have to read the whole chapter, particularly have the picture. There is a Vilakapadam or an explanatory diagram he's drawn. You got to keep that also in there. And then while you read the whole book, whole chapter, so that'll make things very, very clear.
Yes.
And we both of us worked together on that explanatory diagram. If you remember that, Michael.
Yeah.
And we polished that. So very good. With that, we'll conclude today's session. And thank you, Michael. Excellent session. And we'll meet again with Michael next month, first Saturday.